So now we're going to look at how we're going to use the ACSF, the Australian Core Skills Framework, to identify the core skill requirements of our training, the core skill levels of our learner, and the core skill expectations of our training in general. The first thing we're going to look at is our industry standards or benchmarks, or as we often refer to them, the units of competency. And this is how we're going to identify what are the expectations of language literacy and numeracy in the industry. So we're going to look at a unit of competency and we're going to look for keywords. Keywords that indicate the core skills, such as for learning, we're going to be looking at follow, actively seek, review, experiment or ask. For writing, we're going to be looking for words like writing or prepare, develop, design, report. In numeracy, we're going to be looking for words like calculate, estimate, measure, compare. There's also a comprehensive list of trigger words at Taking the Lead, the website that provides some LLN support resources, and it has quite a comprehensive list of the trigger words that indicate the different core skills. But in essence, we're going to stick with the unit of competency and the one that has been completed in the learning manual. You can see where they have gone through the performance criteria and identified where there are concepts of reading or learning, oral communication, writing, and as you go through, you look for the core words or the keywords, the verbs, or other words that are directly related to those core skills. If we have a look at a unit of competency on training.gov.au, such as BSB WHS 201, contribute to the health and safety of self and others, then as we read through the performance criteria, we're going to see those keywords that indicate the core skills. Follow is a learning skill. As soon as you see any documents listed, such as procedures or instructions, that implies reading. When they have to carry out, that's a learning skill. When they have to do system checks, that's a writing skill. When they have to identify persons to make queries and concerns with, that's an oral communication skill. So you work your way through the whole unit of competency, identifying all of the trigger words for the core skills. It's also important to note that in some of the units of competency, they are listing the core skills that are in the particular unit of competency, and some units are actually listing the ACSF levels for those core skills as well. But at this stage, many of them are just listing that the core skills are in the unit of competency and where they are in the unit of competency. You can also look at the performance evidence or the required skills, the knowledge evidence, the required knowledge. In the performance evidence, sometimes they quite specifically list the core skills and sometimes are very clear on the level. Other times it's just giving an indication that they are involved in the unit. The knowledge evidence is going to help you identify the level of the reading skills that they need to have. For example, here they have to explain workplace safety procedures and instructions and explain emergency procedures and commonly use hazards and safety symbols, which is all routine, limited complexity documents, which would be level 3 in the core skills framework. However, once you get down to the fact that they have to summarise the responsibilities as specified in the acts and regulations and codes of practice, then this could indicate that the reading level might start to get into that technically specific level 4 reading skill requirement. So as you go through the unit of competency, you can fill out the LLN requirements of the work context table. You identify which performance criteria had the concepts and what concepts were in there. And as it details in the book, I'm just going to flick through a few pages, I'm very sorry, that it starts to indicate in this particular unit, which is develop teams and individuals, they had to systematically identify needs, create opportunities, maintain knowledge. So that looks at the learning level 4, starting to get into that complex concepts and relatively independent work. They're reading documented feedback, they're reading organisational policies and procedures, competency standards, legislation, and they have to proofread documents. So again, that's looking at the level 4 in the reading. And so you can go through and complete that template to document all of the core skills of your unit of competency. As I said, identify what the highest expectation is. That becomes your ACSF level for that unit of competency. When it comes to identifying what the core skill levels of your learner are, you then need to look for LLN identified tools that would be able to use to assess the LLN levels of your learner. Some of these are available from Precision Consultancy. Some of them are available from the internet. For example, there is one available through safework.com.au. The students work through this online indicator and it comes out with a rating for them. We also have the BKSB program at TAFE, which enables the learners to go through some assessments and it comes out with a rating for them in their reading, writing and numeracy skills. You can also identify the core skills of a learner through talking to them, by getting them to complete forms or write particular documents. You could get them to go through an interview process or demonstrate particular tasks out of your program that will help you identify what their particular core skill levels are. And what you'll end up coming up with is this Spikey profile. We have the levels of the learner the levels of the unit of competency in the grey bar graph, and we have the levels of the learner plotted over the top in the red line graph. And what you can start to see here is the gaps that the learner might be experiencing as they're coming into the program. In this particular circumstance, the learner is at a level 2 in their writing and the expectation of the unit of competency is a level 3, remembering that the units of competency expectation is at the end of the training. So by the end of the training, the learner must demonstrate a writing level of 3. In this particular circumstance, they're going to need some support as you go through the training to move from the level 2 that they're entering with to exit with the level 3 that's required. Similarly, in the oral communication, they're entering at a level 4 and they need to exit at a level 5. Having said that, our understanding of the core skills framework is that people that are at a level 3 have the skills to be able to take themselves further independently, but when you're looking at those gaps, it's still important to identify what support strategies you could suggest and provide to your learners. The last concept that we look at in this comparative profile is the expectations of our training overall. What do we expect our people to demonstrate, do, or perform during the enrolment process? How do they get into our training? And we identify the activities that they're required to do on this particular form. We identify what activities do they have to do to find out about our training and to get enrolled. What activities do they have to do to demonstrate research in the training activities? What research activities do they have to demonstrate in the assessment processes? What writing activities are they expected to perform during the enrolment process? What writing activities are they expected to perform in our general classes and training? And what writing activities are we expecting them to demonstrate in their assessment? And as we go through and identify these, we can then also identify what our overall expectation of our learners are in these core skills, just in our training, not in relation to the actual learning that they're doing. And sometimes we start to realise that our processes are becoming quite complex. And again, we have to look at ways that we can simplify those processes to meet the levels of the training and then also to support the learners as they're coming in Sometimes we can't change the processes, so we have to put support structures in there. And this is where we end up with the third level of comparison. We have the levels of the unit of competency, we have the levels of the training expectations. And at this stage, that looks okay because we're not expecting more than what the unit would expect. So a good way of looking at our training materials, there's a self-assessment questionnaire in there to look at how we expect our learners to engage in the enrolment process, in the training process, and in the learning process, assessment process, sorry. So the key things to remember in all of this is to document down what our expectations of the unit are, what are our expectations of the training, and identify what the core skills of the levels of the learner are through our various tools and indicators. When you come up with your comparative profile, you'll see where the gaps are, either between the learners' levels and the unit levels, and between our training expectations and the unit levels. And in our next session, we're going to look at strategies and processes to help our students meet the gaps and to ensure that we're providing adequate support.